What if the answer to your delay is not that God is ignoring you, but that persistence is shaping you? What if the silence you feel is not rejection, but the space where faith is being formed? And what if the real message of prayer is not about changing God's timing, but about changing your endurance? In Luke 18:1-8, Jesus tells a parable that is very direct in its purpose. The opening line already reveals the meaning. He tells them a story to show that they should always pray and not give up. This is not a story about theory. It is a story about persistence under pressure, about justice in the face of delay, and about faith that continues even when response is not immediate. Jesus begins with a simple scenario in a certain city. There is a judge in that city who does not fear God and does not respect people. This description is important. It tells us immediately that the system in place is not ideal. It is not righteous. It is not compassionate. It is not naturally fair. And in the same city, there is a widow. In the ancient world, a widow often represents vulnerability. She has no visible power, no authority, and limited social influence. She is dependent on justice systems that may or may not respond to her needs. This widow comes to the judge repeatedly, asking for justice against her adversary. The text does not describe her case in detail, but it is clear that she is seeking vindication, fairness, or protection from wrongdoing. At first, the judge refuses. He ignores her request. There is no immediate response, no attention, no action. But she does not stop. She keeps coming. Day after day, she continues to present her case. The repetition is the key element of the story. This is not a one-time request. It is ongoing persistence. Eventually, something changes, but not because the judge becomes righteous. The text makes it clear that he remains unjust in character. Instead, his motivation changes. He says to himself, "Even though I do not fear God or care what people think, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will see that she gets justice so that she won't eventually wear me out with her coming." This statement reveals something interesting about human systems. Even unjust systems can respond to persistence. Even reluctant authority can be moved by consistent pressure. The judge does not act out of compassion, he acts out of exhaustion. And this is where Jesus shifts from story to meaning. He says, listen to what the unjust judge says. In other words, if even an unjust authority responds to persistence, how much more will a just and righteous God respond to those who cry out to him? This is the central contrast of the parable. It is not comparing God to the unjust judge. It is using contrast to highlight certainty of response. Jesus continues, "Will not God bring about justice for his chosen ones who cry out to him day and night? Will he keep putting them off?" Then he gives the answer, "I tell you, he will see that they get justice, and quickly." This statement introduces tension between human perception and divine timing. From a human perspective, delay feels like absence. But from the perspective of the parable, delay does not equal denial. The widow's persistence becomes a model of faith under waiting. The judge's eventual response becomes an illustration of inevitability when persistence is applied. Then Jesus asks a deeper question that shifts the focus from God's action to human faith. However, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on the earth? This final question reframes the entire parable. It is no longer just about justice or timing. It becomes about endurance of faith itself. Because the real issue is not whether God responds. The parable has already established that justice will come. The question is whether people will continue believing while waiting. This teaching addresses a very human struggle, the gap between asking and receiving. The widow experiences delay, repetition, silence, resistance, yet she continues. Her persistence is not emotional intensity alone. It is sustained action. She keeps returning, she keeps asking, she keeps presenting her case. That pattern is essential to the meaning of the parable. Persistence here is not about volume or aggression. It is about consistency. The judge represents a system that does not naturally respond to compassion. The widow represents a person without structural power. The interaction between them creates a tension that resolves only through endurance. Jesus uses this structure to highlight something about prayer and faith. Prayer is not described as a one-time expression. It is presented as ongoing engagement. The phrase "cry out day and night" emphasizes continuity. It is not occasional, it is sustained. This does not mean repetition for the sake of repetition. It reflects a posture of trust that continues despite delay. The widow does not stop because of silence. She continues because her expectation remains active. The judge's internal reasoning is also important. He admits his lack of fear of God and lack of concern for people, yet he still acts. This reveals that even flawed systems can be influenced by persistence. But the contrast Jesus draws is sharper. If persistence can move an unjust judge, then divine justice is not uncertain or reluctant in the same way. The difference is not whether response will come. The difference is how we understand delay. From the human side, delay feels like uncertainty. From the perspective of the parable, delay is not the final state. The phrase, "bring about justice quickly," introduces another layer. It does not necessarily mean immediate in human terms. It suggests certainty and eventual fulfillment. The timing is not always aligned with human expectation, but the outcome is secure. Then the focus shifts to faith itself. When the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on the earth? This question does not have an immediate answer in the text. It is intentionally open. It invites reflection rather than conclusion. It suggests that the real challenge is not only waiting for answers, but maintaining belief during waiting. Faith in this context is not passive agreement. It is active persistence. It is continuing to pray when there is no visible change. It is continuing to trust when there is no immediate result. It is continuing to return, like the widow, even when response is delayed. The widow does not rely on strength of position. She relies on consistency of action. This creates a model where persistence becomes expression of faith, not replacement for it. Another important aspect of the parable is emotional resilience. The widow faces repeated rejection, yet she does not withdraw. She does not stop engaging with the system. Instead, she continues to present her case. That continued engagement suggests that faith includes emotional endurance. It is not only about believing once, but continuing to believe over time. The judge's final decision is not based on fairness, it is based on persistence. That detail highlights a contrast between motivation and outcome. But Jesus uses that contrast to show something greater. Divine response is not based on reluctance. If even reluctance can be overcome by persistence, then justice rooted in righteousness is not uncertain. The parable therefore builds confidence not in human systems, but in divine consistency. The widow's role is central because she represents those without visible advantage. She has no authority, no influence, and no leverage, yet she has persistence. And in the story, persistence becomes more powerful than position. This is a reversal of expectation. In many systems, influence determines outcome. In this story, persistence plays a defining role. The teaching therefore elevates a quality available to everyone, regardless of status, endurance. It also reframes prayer as relational persistence rather than transactional request. The widow does not approach once and leave. She continues returning. That returning is key. Because faith in this passage is not measured by how quickly answers arrive, but by whether engagement continues during waiting. The final question about faith at the return of the Son of Man broadens the meaning beyond the story itself. It connects individual persistence to a larger narrative of belief over time. It asks whether faith will remain active in the face of delay, silence, or uncertainty. The parable does not guarantee immediate outcomes in human timing. But it does emphasize certainty of justice and importance of persistence. The widow's story becomes a symbol of those who continue to believe even when circumstances do not immediately change. It is not a story of instant resolution. It is a story of sustained engagement. And in that sustained engagement, something deeper is formed: endurance of faith. The judge changes his decision because of persistence. But the listener is invited to understand persistence differently, not as pressure on God, but as expression of trust. The difference matters. Because in this teaching, persistence is not about convincing God. It is about continuing relationship through waiting. The widow's voice represents continuity. She does not allow silence to end her request, and that continuity becomes the central message of the parable. Justice will come. Faith is tested in the waiting. And persistence becomes the visible expression of trust in what has not yet appeared. The story ends with a question, not a conclusion. That question remains open because it is meant to be lived, not just answered. When delay happens, when silence continues, when answers are not immediate, what remains? Faith that stops, or faith that persists? That is the question Jesus leaves with the listener, and that is the quiet power of this parable. Thank you for watching this video. If this message gave you strength or reflection, please like the video, follow the channel, and share it with someone who needs encouragement to keep going today.